All right. Well, it's 11:11. Let's get started. Welcome to Financial Economics 2121. I am Professor Samaniego. I've been teaching this class for many years now, and I'm very glad that we are together. I wish we were in person, but we'll do our best in this online environment. Since today is the first day of class, I thought it was worth doing two things. One thing I think that it's important is to go through the syllabus to make sure we all understand how the course is set up and what the expectations are. You, of course, should also keep me informed of your expectations for the class. And I want to walk you through a little bit about how we're going to do things online. And if we have time at the end, I'd like to have a little discussion about what it is that this course is actually about as a means of introduction beyond just the administrative details. And finally, if we have time, I'd like to have a little quiz to see how we've learned all the stuff that's in the syllabus and so on, just for a little fun as well. All right. And so the question is, again, what are financial markets? And I was saying earlier that it's kind of like the market for loans. But what happens when there is a loan? Let's just go with that approximation first. For there to be a loan, just like with any other transaction, of course, you need two people, right? One is someone who needs money, so person one, or needs money and doesn't have it, right? Or doesn't have enough. And you need a second person who has money, but doesn't need it. So then you have this possibility where the person who has money but doesn't need it might give the money to the other one. Right? But of course, unless they are kind-hearted and want to give that person a present, they wouldn't be giving that person the money today unless they were getting something in return. And what is it that they're getting in return? If we just think of this as being a simple loan, well, of course, the answer is they're getting money tomorrow. But there's two key observations we want to make, at least two key observations, maybe three, about why this transaction might be difficult. One is that suppose we are in today. So we're in the moment where this person over here is giving the money to that person over there. Incidentally, what do we call a person who has money but gives it to someone else in exchange for money tomorrow? This is a lender. And of course, the other one is a borrower. This person is giving the money to this one today. The other one isn't giving money to them immediately. It's not happening until a later date. So what they're giving them today in exchange for money today is not money. It's rather the promise of money tomorrow. So what happens in financial markets is that two things are exchanged at the same time. One person gives money, in return they get the promise. And this promise, or I guess you could call it promise, you could call it an agreement. I mean, if it's a promise between friends, then you could just leave it as promise and agreement. But if it's between two people who don't necessarily know each other and for whom this is a business transaction, then what this is a form of contract. And you can imagine that in general, once you've given me the money today, why should I pay you back tomorrow? Well, the answer might be because you're my friend, but if you're not, then there might be an incentive for me to take the money you gave me and run away. And that's where this word contract here really comes in, because in financial markets, what we're exchanging are contracts that are enforceable. So another observation here is that whether or not financial markets function well is probably going to have to do with how well the legal system works, or what kinds of contracts the legal system has said are or are not allowed. So a contract of this kind, where you're getting money in exchange, money today in exchange for money tomorrow, we're also going to, as I mentioned earlier, call an asset. So an asset is some kind of contract that entitles the person that owns it to some payments in the future. So one way to look at this transaction between these people is that the lender, let's call the lender L and the borrower B, the lender L has given money to the borrower B, and borrower B has received a loan. But an alternative way to think about it, which is sometimes more useful, is that the lender L has bought an asset. They paid some money for it, which is this, and they're going to get a different amount of money, presumably more, right? Since they have to be compensated for having given up spending now in the future. So a key thing that's making financial markets already different from the market for goods in general is time. The fact that it's a transaction that occurs where different parts of it occur at different dates, like money now versus money in the future. Now, since time matters, another thing that matters is, again, you've given me money now. What is there to stop me running away and not paying you back in the future? Well, one reason I might not do that is because there's a legal system that enforces it. So the legal system is critical to whether or not this works. And you don't normally think about the legal system mattering that much for the market for, I don't know, general goods and services. Another is a lot of could happen between the date when you give me the money and the date when I'm supposed to pay you back. Maybe I actually wanted to. Maybe the legal system, maybe because I want to keep my reputation, maybe because you're my friend, for whatever reason. But what if I just couldn't? What if something happened? Let's say I borrowed money because I wanted to start a flower shop. And then it turns out I opened my flower shop in January of 2020. And then a pandemic came along and my flower shop just didn't have the kinds of profits I expected because the economy went down and people started buying fewer flowers to give to each other, then I might not be able to pay you back even though I wanted to. So there's also risk. And the risk, of course, is in there because of the time, because between you giving me money and me paying you back, things could happen that we didn't accurately forecast. So I guess we could write risk uncertainty. There's another kind of uncertainty there. What if there are two kinds of borrowers? Borrowers who are trustworthy and borrowers who are not and are more likely to run away and not pay you back if they at all can. That's a different kind of uncertainty, right? It's not about uncertainty where something went wrong that we couldn't have forecast. It's about uncertainty where you can't tell who your business partner is. You can't tell if they're really being square with you or not. So we're going to be able to have to talk separately about both of those kinds of uncertainty. And again, they both become more important. Well, I guess they could matter in the markets for goods and services, right? Like, for example, if you want to buy a second-hand car from me, maybe harder for you to tell whether I'm selling you a good car or a bad car, whereas I know because I've had time to investigate what's inside. But in financial markets, again, because of the time issue, it's these risks and uncertainties become a lot more important. So that's roughly the broad brush of the topic that we're going to look at today. Sorry, we're going to look at this semester. And we're not going to talk about the legal system too much, but it will come up every now and then when we see cases where some transaction in the market was supposed to happen and then something went wrong. Like someone broke a contract and ran away. We'll come across some of those examples later. But one thing I could tell you is about a bit of some research that I did a long time ago. Whoops, let's find a ruler. Not a long time ago, a few years ago, I did some research, and what I did was there was a survey across European countries. Why Europe? Because, well, they have the European Union, they have many countries there. They have one fewer than they used to, but anyway. And what they did was they surveyed 250,000 entrepreneurs, and they asked them questions like, is blank an important source of money for you? And what I did was I took the percentage of people who answered yes. Let's say, is our bank loans an important source of funds for you? Or are family and friends an important source of funds for you? Things like that for running your business. And on this axis, I took what's known as financial development, which basically tells you something about how well is the legal system able to support the operation of banks and all the other things that entities that function in financial markets. And when this question was, are bank loans an important source of money? You have this relationship like this, where countries where financial development was low had very little in terms of bank finance. Countries where the financial development was high had a lot more. Whoops. And then when this question was, are family and friends an important source of funds for your business? You got the opposite. So countries where financial development was low, people who have businesses rely a lot on their family and friends. And people who, businessmen and businesswomen in countries that were financially developed did not rely so much on their family and friends. So what does this tell us that well-functioning financial markets do? And what role might the legal system play in it? The legal system allows you to lend money to someone who isn't family and friends with the assurance that most likely they're going to pay you back, right? If the legal system doesn't give that guarantee, then you wouldn't be able to raise all those funds. You would have to rely on your family and friends, but it also means that this whole pool of funds that you could borrow from to run your businesses just isn't there, right? So this is also a hint going later on for how financial markets are really important to the proper operation of an economy, and also a hint that deep down what really matters actually is the legal system adequately supporting people's business activities, and thus the ability of people to confidently lend money to each other knowing that those contracts are going to be fulfilled. Any questions or comments about this? Let me save this quickly so we can refer back to it later if we wish. So the next thing, let me see if I want to open a new one. Yeah, let's do this. So the next thing I mentioned is that financial markets come in different types. Now, if you were, well, maybe you have, if you were to need some money right now, then chances are you would go and, well, assuming that we're not relying on family and friends, which you might, you would presumably go to a bank. On the other hand, suppose we were companies. Like by we, I mean people. But companies don't necessarily do that. Companies may be able to go to a bank and get a loan, but especially large ones might not do that. What they might do is raise funds by selling assets directly to individuals. By what I mean, for example, suppose Tesla decides that they want to raise funds. They can do it by issuing new shares and selling them to people. Tesla is right now the company with the highest value of shares of any company in the United States. You and I can't issue shares. If we could, we would be just selling. A share is basically a promise of the future profits of the company. And the point here is that through the stock market, large companies can sell assets directly to individuals. This is called direct financial markets. Whereas banks are different. They're large entities. So actually, let me draw a little picture of what direct financial markets are. Here's the lender, here's the borrower, and the lender directly gives the funds to the borrower. Remember, that's money now. And then the borrower returns the funds to the lender later. And there's no one in between. But what happens with you and me is that we can't deal directly with borrowers. Instead, you have a large entity in between us called a bank. So let's draw a bank here. Whoops. Here's a bank. And if you are someone who has extra money that you don't need right now, you probably wouldn't go around looking for people to give it, so you just go give it to the bank and earn some interest. On the other hand, if you're a borrower and you needed money now, you wouldn't go around looking for individuals who might give you money. Rather, you just go to the bank and say, can I please take out a loan? So there are these banks, and then you pay the bank back later. So while large companies are able to deal directly with financial markets and deal directly with people that lend them money by selling shares, for example, or by selling bonds, we'll get to what those things are later. For the most part, anyone but the very largest players are stuck dealing with indirect financial markets. With indirect financial markets, what you have is something like a bank, or more generally, something called a financial intermediary that stands between the lenders and the borrowers. Now, I mentioned that this course is not about memorizing things. Of course, there are some things we need to memorize. It's about understanding the economics of financial markets. So we've already come across several facts of life. Sorry, facts about financial markets. One was that I said that a lot of financial markets are actually indirect, right? It's only very large companies are able to borrow directly from lenders. And then the economics question would be why? Why is it that most of us are stuck having to deal with financial intermediaries? Why do financial intermediaries exist? And why is it that large companies nonetheless are somehow able not to depend as much on financial intermediaries? That's two questions. There's a hint at an answer for why is that financial intermediaries are so common. And the hint of the answer, I think, is it would be pretty hard if I didn't know where to look, for me, if I were a borrower, to find a suitable lender out of the pool of people in the world. Let's say if we were together in the classroom and I needed to borrow, how would I know, and I needed to borrow, let's say, exactly $10,000. How would I find someone in the classroom who has exactly $10,000 they don't need? And how easy would it be for them to trust me that I'm going to pay them back? Whereas it's easy to find the bank, and they have a menu of loans that they offer, and the reason it doesn't matter to them whether their needs exactly match mine, like it's exactly $10,000 that they have to offer, is because they've pooled all the funds of all the possible lenders, and they can use that to share out among the borrowers as the borrowers need. So they're able to do all of this at much lower cost. So what we'll find is that a lot of these puzzles, like why are indirect financial markets so common, why are direct financial markets only available to big players, we'll find that a lot of these come down to two problems that plague financial markets that are not as important in other markets. And one, I was hinting at the cost of finding a trading partner that would be suitable. I'm going to call that transactions costs. So one thing that explains why financial markets are structured the way they do, the way they are, is transaction costs. And the other, remember I was saying, another problem, of course, would be, how do I know that you're going to pay me back? How do I know which is the right kind of, if you're the right kind of borrower, the kind of borrower who is trustworthy and is trying to keep their reputation rather than take my money and run away and swindle me? Well, the bank can develop expertise, right? They don't just give money to anyone. They also spend time and effort checking their credit scores, or maybe they have other more subtle ways of identifying whether or not someone is a good borrower. Maybe they look at how well they're dressed, whether they're looking after themselves. They're looking after themselves, maybe they'll look after their company and whatever else they're doing with the funds. And so the problem here is that you, as the borrower, presumably know if you're a trustworthy type or not. It's the lender that doesn't know, and then maybe the bank has expertise that you alone wouldn't have that helps them make a good match here. We're going to call those broad problems where one side of the transaction knows more than the other. I'm going to call that, asymmetric information. So one of the people in this transaction knows more than the other about what they're doing and may exploit that to their advantage and to the disadvantage of the other one. All right? And another one, I'm just going to put it here, though the text doesn't emphasize it much, is risk. If I lend you a lot of money and your project goes bad and you can't pay me back, that might make a big difference to me and my life. On the other hand, the bank has eggs in many baskets, as it were. We have thousands of borrowers, and they may even be able to predict roughly how many of them are going to be unable to pay them back. They may not know which ones, but they know on average how many will. And so because they've lent to many different people, the risk they face overall is diluted. And so the bank may be more capable of surviving what happens to any particular borrower. They may even would experience much less uncertainty than a single lender would exposed to a single borrower. So here's an example of how we use economic theory, the presence of transaction costs, the presence of asymmetric information, and the presence of risk that's very hard to insure against, how we can use that to explain a feature of financial markets. In this case, two features: the prevalence of indirect markets, and I guess I didn't talk about this, why are large companies able to overcome this? I think the answer to that is probably straightforward. Remember, I used the example of Tesla and how they don't necessarily need banks to raise funds. They can go directly and borrow from the public. Of course, we can see what Tesla is doing, right? They're in the news all the time. So there's a lot less of asymmetric information about them. We can see what they're doing. Sometimes what Elon Musk does is a little unusual, but again, he's just the leader of the company. The whole company itself has a much bigger plan. We can see what they're doing, see if they're being successful. And so we don't need a bank in order to, or rather they don't need a bank in order to assuage people about the quality of their business plan. Any questions, thoughts, doubts about this? All right. I just want to, let's see, we have about 10 minutes left. So maybe rather than continuing on this line, we could pause. And if you have a minute, I want to test something out, if that's okay. I want to test our ability to do a quick quiz at the end of the class to see whether we've learned anything. I guess one more thing I'd like to say, maybe before we do that, is, let's see, I talked about direct versus indirect. We already implicitly talked about loans versus shares, right? In the case of a loan, you're supposed to give someone a repayment. In the case of shares, you get something that's connected to the profits of the entity, like a share of the profits of the business that you supported. The text is going to refer to this as debt versus equity. And we will think about how both of those are different. And there's another thing, which is, suppose, as I was saying, suppose Tesla puts out some new shares into the world for the first time. That is called the primary market. But another thing that's special about shares and about things that certain other large companies can do is that once they've borrowed, or when firms borrow, they usually use the kind of debt that we refer to as bonds, but for the time being, you can just think of them as being the same as loans. A key feature about them is that they can be resold. So let's say if I buy some shares of Tesla, I'm waiting for my share of the profits, but then I decide, you know what, I can't wait. I decided I need to raise money now. I can then sell them to you, get my money now, and now it's you that Tesla owes money to. So assets like that can be sold multiple times, they are called assets that are trading in the secondary market. So that means it's a transaction not between the initial borrower and the first lender, but now I'm selling you the contract, so now you are the lender, and I get some money in between. So these are the key distinctions that I wanted to cover today. Then we'll go over them a little bit next time to try and learn a bit more, again, of the economics of why is it that this kind of contract is prevalent, why is it this other thing is only common for large companies. Okay? So I'm saving all those images. I'll try and upload them later. All right. Any questions, comments? Let's start. So you should see these 4 colors. Click on the answer for the correct one. Financial markets are markets for. And you have time running down. All right. Balanced alpaca is winning. Remember, speed is important here as well as accuracy. Question 2. An asset is a kind of. All right, seems that most of you are doing well. All right, balanced alpaca is still on top. Is this true? In the US, the monetary system is entirely backed by gold. We didn't talk about that today, so this is a question of general knowledge. This is something we'll naturally talk about later on in the semester. Homework in this course is due often. Okay, great. Almost there. Question 5. This class is mainly about learning the details of financial markets, economic theory that explains financial markets, how to make money in financial markets, or monetary policy. right, great. And last question. This is a photo of GW campus on January 20th, 2017. What is the military shut down campus every 4 years? I see someone has a sense of humor. All right, so now let's see, how did you do? Third place is Helpful Gecko. Second place is Swift Finch. And first place is Bronze Alpaca. So Bronze Alpaca had a quick climb at the end there. Very good. And now, let's see. Bronze Alpaca, who are you?
Oh, that's me.
Who is it?
Varun. I can turn on my camera.
Okay, sure. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I have to stop sharing so we can see you.
Hello.
Ah, there you go. Hey, hello.
I am Bronze
So
Alpaca.
you get, excellent. Nice to see you. So you get to choose, the prize for today is that you get to choose what silly Snapchat filter you can put on me for the closing of this class. Do you have any Snapchat filter you'd like to try out of these or any others? I can just search here.
The baby
for
one.
anything.
The baby one.
The baby one.
Yeah.
Was there a this one? Yes. Okay. There you go. So that's me as a baby. Let's see. I think now you should be able to see me. How am I as a baby? Is it working or is it too small?
It's working.
It's working.
Okay, great. All right. So I hope you enjoy your prize. And this is, of course, recorded, so this is preserved for all posterity. I guess it's almost time to end the class, so thank you very much, everyone. I hope that was useful. By all means, feel free to give me feedback. So, for example, if the writing isn't clear, or the voice isn't clear, or the music is too loud, or anything like that, please tell me, and I will make adjustments for next time. All right? Anything else you'd like to share? Thank you very much, then, and I'll look forward to talking to you on Wednesday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Have a great time. Bye.